So a dimension is something that can be measured. We like to talk about dimensions because they're the things around us. It describes the world around us in some way. So some examples of dimensions are things like length, time, weight, density, energy, pressure, temperature. Anything that you can really think of is a dimension. There are two types of dimensions. The first is the fundamental dimensions or basic dimensions, and the second are derived dimensions. And we'll talk about both of these. Fundamental dimensions are dimensions that can't be broken down or described by anything else. So let's talk about length. Length is obviously something that we can measure. We can get a ruler out, we can measure something, and we can know that something does have some length. But we can't talk about a length in terms of anything else. I can't say, oh, this pencil that I have in my hand, I could say it's a length, but I could also say that it's somehow a temperature or a time. It doesn't make sense to do that. So length can't be broken down into anything else, so we call that fundamental. An example of a derived unit is area. Area is something that I can measure. I can measure something and say how many square inches something is, but I can break it apart. From math, we know that the formula for area is length squared, or a length times a length, or a length times a width. What it really is it's two lengths multiplied by each other. And so we can see that area is a dimension. It's obviously something that we can describe. It's something that we can measure, but it's made up of two lengths that are multiplied by each other. So that one can be broken down. That's why we call it derived. There are 7 fundamental dimensions, again, dimensions that can't be broken down. Those are length, time, mass, temperature, amount, electric current, and light intensity. So outside of these, we can have a ton of other things. We have things like energy, and we have density, and we have volume, and we have all these other things we can talk about. We have forces and power. But what they are is they're a combination of these 7 fundamental dimensions, and I can combine these in multiple ways. We combine them by either multiplication or division. So I want to go over a quick example, and that example is speed, or often velocity. Those are used somewhat interchangeably when we're first starting out in science. There is a difference, but we'll talk about speed. And speed, if we think in terms of driving a car or running, a lot of times we think of miles per hour. And so a mile is a length, per means divide, and hour is a time. So we know that speed is a length times a time. Let me see. I'll highlight a couple important things here. All right, so that's what speed is. Speed is a length times a time. We can see that we have a length and a time. So those are the two things that we're describing here. They're both fundamental dimensions, but we're combining them in a way that gives us what we call speed. Now, just because we have a length and a time doesn't mean we're talking about speed. It depends how I combine them. I could have a length times a time, but that is not a speed. That's a length time. Maybe we don't know what that is, but it's definitely not speed. I could have time divided by length. That's the opposite. That's not a speed either. I could also do 1 over length times time. That's not a speed as well. So I only get a speed when I have one length and one time, and they have to be in the proper order of length divided by time.